Before we get started, let's briefly go over some fundamentals, and then let's actually get into the process of carving in the planes of the face. So this is my first bust carving from a year ago. As you can see, there's a lot wrong with it. The proportions aren't right at all. The ears are off. Pretty much everything on this is off. At the time, I was super proud of it. And looking back on it with the tools I had and the knowledge I had, still pretty proud of it. But I think it can be improved. This is my one of my most recent carvings. This one is a portrait of my wife. If we look at this and compare it to that, there's a huge difference. So this is just after 1 year of studying. So let's quickly go over some of those fundamentals, and then let's actually get into the carving process. Sound like a plan? So George Bridgman sets it out like this. He kind of sets the face and wants you to think about the face in terms of a block. As wood carvers, that resonates with us because we look at a raw block of wood and that's what we're used to working with. He does this because you have a front plane, a top, a bottom, and side planes. And then of course you've got a back plane over here if you're carving in the round, which on this figure we actually are. So Rick Casale, he likes that idea, but he suggests maybe trimming down the sides of that and thinking about it more along the terms of having these diagonal planes in place. Caricature carvers, kind of on the same note, they oftentimes will start with a triangle because eventually what you're going to have is you're going to have 90 degrees from the nose back to the cheek. So they kind of set that in place to begin with as kind of a guideline. So a lot of people use in drawing something called a Riley method, where you draw a circle and then you divide that circle in half this way and in half this way, and then it sets it up into 4 different quadrants, and you divide those quadrants and kind of help you figure out where proportionally things need to lie. So a sibling of the Raleigh method, the Loomis method, is depicted here, and the two systems for drawing are so closely tied that I get them mixed up sometimes, so you might see me using a merger of the two as we go through this video. A citation is below for this image. So I start by drawing a circle, and I just use a little bucket that I had on hand to get kind of a circle. Circles don't have to be perfect. Then I divide it in half, and I divide it into 3 parts again, and I add another third at the bottom. Now the head will be 5 eyes wide, so I went ahead and mapped that out, kind of set that distance in, and using a V-part and gouge, I went ahead and just set the bottom part of the nose in place. The eyebrow line, of course, will be the middle line of that, and then once I've got the nose in place, I use that angle to go back to the ear. This will be the one part of the video where I go really fast. The rest of the video won't be quite this fast. So let's recap here. The width of the head is about 5 eyes wide. There is a diagonal line that will go from about the bottom of the nose to the top of that ear. The eyes will sit halfway through the length of the head from top to bottom. As you draw that initial circle and you divide it in half, that division line will show you where the eyebrow needs to lie. The pupils of the eye, if you draw a line straight down from those, that'll give you about the width of the mouth. And from the inside corner of the eye down will give you about the width of the nose then. There's several little aspects of that are a little bit difficult to see in this video, but you can easily Google several different images that will give you a lot of information about where specific facial features need to lie on that face for it to look realistic. Like oftentimes people will draw the eyes way too far up on the head or something like that, and that makes it look unrealistic. So back to the carving. Once I get that, then I start to then take off some of the material and start to map out the front plane of the face. And mapping in those eye sockets, or starting to carve in those eye sockets, will start to form that front plane of the face. If you noticed in this diagram right here, you can kind of see a difference between the side planes and the front planes, and notice the side of the nose is then part of that side plane. So then the eye sockets will actually be much deeper than you would think they would be. So I'm just mapping that in and kind of tapering the nose back to a level that makes sense for the depth of the eye socket. And I'll be doing more with those eye sockets as we continue. So again, just looking at my resources, making sure that I'm right, making sure that proportionally I'm still good. Then setting in the chin a little bit, starting to even that up, and making that part of that front plane of the face. This figure in particular will have kind of a wide face, so I have to keep that in mind. So as I come down, then you can see a difference between that side plane and the front plane on the actual figure that I'm carving here. And as I was working on the chin, you could see how I kind of mapped that in place and how that falls into the front plane as well. Now I'm starting to work on the front plane of the head. This is the actual part where the forehead bone is going to be coming out. I'm not going to be doing much with that on this piece though, because the figure has shaggy hair that will come down over that, and with carving, once it's removed, you can't put it back. So you always have to keep those little idiosyncrasies of each carving in mind. Continuing to deepen those eye sockets, and then making that upper lip triangular, I guess you could say, as it tapers back into that cheek. So if you think of from the nose up to the eyebrow line, that's going to be a little bit more flat. But once you go from the bottom of the nose down to the top lip, it's going to be much more triangular because the nose is going to sit halfway on the face. And that's one of those things where you don't want to get carried away like I did on that first carving that I showed you, and flatten that part out too much, because that'll make it look wonky and weird and not quite right. So continuing then just to even up as I go and just kind of adjust. I'm starting to work in some of the side planes of the head at this point. Those side planes will be partially visible but not completely visible, like I said, because of the hair. However, that structure of the skull is still going to be evident even if there is hair or even if there's drapery. You're not going to lose the skeletal value that's underneath the muscle and underneath the hair. In fact, the hair or the drapery or whatever it is, the muscle, the skin, should complement that underlying structure. And you can see that as I'm working in here, I'm starting to taper back on those cheeks and work to make that more of that 90-degree angle. And starting now for the first time to, well, I'd done a little bit before, but very little, to start to map out that bottom plane of the head. There will be so much drapery on this figure, and with the angle that the head is going to be at, you won't see much of that. Now in this section, I drew a circle where the mouth is, from kind of the nostril down to the jawline, and from the corner of the eye down to the jawline as well, in a circular fashion. And that, I'll be honest with you, it has something to do with the underlying muscle structure. And with the small circle around the mouth, it has to do with the conical shape of the teeth, which is actually part of the skeleton. So just mapping that in helps me to understand where different shadows are going to lie. So a big part of the planes of the face here, planes of the head, is to help you map out where there's going to be difference in values or difference in shading. And in drawing, you don't actually just draw out strict lines, instead you draw shadows. And in carving, you have to make sure that those shadows show up, and show up in the right spots, otherwise it's not going to look correct. And those circles that I just drew kind of help me determine, where is that little bulbous part going to be where the teeth are showing through, and where is there going to be a little bit of a crease where you're going to see a little bit of a difference in shade. That's why I like a strong light from overhead to help me really see the shadows as I work. Now I'm just starting to work back some. Notice I still have that little diagonal line that makes a tiny triangle going up to that to show me where the ear is going to lie. Roundabout where the ear is going to lie. That's the one thing on this figure that's not going to be proportionally correct to a human, just because he's a hobbit and he'll have large pointed ears. So continuing then to map out that nose. and to get that indentation underneath that bottom lip, and to start to work back where that lip will crease into the cheek. Then once I get things kind of set out, I start to take away some of that excess material that I know I'm going to have to remove anyway. That just helps me visualize and picture as I move through. I hope you've enjoyed this part of the video. I know it was quick. If you have any questions, please leave a comment and ask me. I really appreciate you guys, and I hope that you pick up a set of these Flexcut tools and put them to use. Thank you, and have a great and blessed day.